Now let's continue. We have also a way we can nest, or we can have several if structures being nested or being hung inside another. That's what we call nesting. So we can have the if then else structure which tests for multiple cases. So we can have one inside another, and that's what we call nesting of and basically any control structure can be nested, be it a while loop, a do while, or whatever. You can put one inside another. What normally happens if you nest, then the condition or the loop that is inside has to be executed first before the outer loop. That means you have the inner loop executed, and then the outer loop follows. Let us look at this selection structure called select case. So select case is also a control structure in Visual Basic, which is an alternative to the if then. If then, else if control structure, because it is used to basically execute a block of statement among many blocks. So that is why we have several cases whereby we are going to test the different cases. The syntax will be, for the select case structure, you'll have the select keyword or select case. In this case, you'll have your variable there or your index. Then you test your variable against several cases, maybe case 0. If it is true, you run some statements. You go to case 2 or case 1, like that, until case n. Then you go to the last case and you end select. Because it is a select control structure, you end the select. So these are the control structures that we call them decision making or selection. Now let's look at repetition control structures, or what we normally call loops. So if you happen to be repeating some group of statements, then we are talking about iteration or repetition. That means you repeat some condition until that condition becomes false. So as long as the condition is true, the repetition continues until the condition becomes false. That's when the loop goes out. So an example of one of the control structure is the do while loop statement. So the do while loop statement is used to execute statements until a condition tests false. Yeah. So if, for example, I was counting from 1 to 100, then as long as my variable is less than 100, yeah, then it will continue counting until it reaches the value 100. So when it reaches the value 100, it compares 100 is equal to 100. It performs a number of statements. It increments the counter. Yeah, every time it loops, there must be a counter that is incremented by 1, because it is counting. Yeah, until whatever is in the counter is equivalent to the condition. So if whatever is in the counter goes now to 101 and I was counting up to 100, then that means 101 is not equal to 100. It's actually greater. So now in this case the condition becomes false and the loop now goes out. Yeah, so the do while loop is one of the loop that is very famous, and we say with a do while is that with this loop it performs some statements, or it will have to test the condition, or it basically runs once first before it starts testing a condition. So it executes a statement before it tests a condition. We have the while when statement. While when is basically just like the do while loop, behaves the same. So here you have a counter variable. You have to create a variable to store the count, the number of times it repeats, and then you should have your condition and then your statements to be executed, and then with the word when. With the do while, you have to put the loop keyword at the bottom. Yeah, that means you can have an example of dim number as an integer where you're going to store your number. Then you say your number, initialize it to 1, then continue performing repeated looping until my number is less or equal to 3. So once my number goes beyond 3, the loop goes out. So also with the when, it is still the same. You can have your counter initialized to 1, and then it will keep on looping as long as your counter or your counter variable is less than the condition. Then it will keep on looping until your counter now exceeds the value of the condition. Then it moves out of the loop. Another loop we have is the do loop. A while statement. It's just like the opposite. Do something while. Yeah. So here with the do while loop, we are simply saying the statement first executes, the control structure executes the statements first before the condition is tested. Yeah. So here we are saying do something. You can even say increment the counter before testing a condition. Yeah, so it will do something while the condition is true, and when it becomes false, it exits the loop. We still have another loop called do until loop statement. Do until loop. So for do until loop, this one is a structure that tests a condition for false, or we want to test if the condition is false. Yeah, the other ones are testing if the condition is true, it does ABCD. When the condition becomes false, the loop exits. But with the do until, we are saying if the condition is false, yeah, then that means it will test the condition until it becomes false. Okay. So an example will be if we are again counting maybe from 1 up to 10, and we initialize our counter variable to 0, then we start counting and incrementing the counter. When the condition becomes false, the loop exists, or it exits the code. Yeah. Another loop we may think of is the for next loop in Visual Basic. So the for next loop is a control structure that is used to also efficiently, manage your code, because it is a condensed kind of loop. So for this one, you loop and you can increment it stepwise. Yeah, as it is looping, it's incrementing. So you can say if your x is your variable, which is an integer variable, then you want to count from 1 to 50. Yeah, then you can say for your variable, which is x, is equal to 1 up to 50. So you say for next 1 to 50. So it means that it's going to count from 1 to 50. Then keep on printing the value of x, or keep on printing the counter. So it will print 1 up to 50. So when when the counter falls to the value of 51, it becomes false and it exists. You can also tell your loop to do some stepwise counting, maybe by incrementing in steps of 2 or whatever number of steps you want to increase it. So you can say for my variable x, 1 count to 50, then use the word step. So you specify the number of steps it should be skipping, or it should be updating your counter in steps of 2, 5s, or whatever. Then keep on printing the value of the variable that is being incremented. So this is the for next loop. We have another loop called for each, then next. For each, this is a loop that is almost similar to the for next loop, but the for each, what it does, it iterates, especially where you have a list of items, or you have a collection of items in an array. Then this is the right loop for you to use. You can be printing every variable, every value in that variable by using the for each. Yeah. So you can say for each item in my collection, whatever collection you have, or whatever array of items you have, you can say for each array item you have in your array, yeah, then do ABCD, yeah, then you say next, so it will keep on checking and printing. Now, having looked at these loops, we can have a scenario where a loop is looping forever and it doesn't exit. But what if we wanted a loop not just to loop through all, we want a loop whereby it doesn't have to go through all the values. If you are specifying, maybe you want to loop 1 up to 10, but we can set a condition whereby we can exit the loop as long as it has done whatever it is required, maybe in the first step or in the second step. So we don't have to wait until it loops 10 times. Maybe in the third step, that's where we are satisfied with the condition that we wanted. So we can use some statements such as exit. So the word exit can be used to exit a for loop. You can exit a do while loop by just using the exit statement in your looping. So for an example, in a for next loop, you can say exit for. That means after it has repeatedly done the looping, then you say if the result, or if the variable, maybe I was looping maybe from 1 to 10, and then I wanted it to exit when it reaches step 5. So I'll say if the variable now has been updated to 5, it has iterated, it has done looping until now my counter is 5 and I'm looping up to 10. I'll say I don't have now to loop up to 10. I can exit at 5. If my variable x is equal to 5, then I'll say exit for, or exit whatever if it's a do while. So it will exit. Yeah. So these are some of the statements that are very important, because you see, when a loop is being executed, it is tying the resources such as memory and whatever. So we may not wait for it to finish looping all the items. So as long as you've gotten the result that you wanted, then you can exit the loop. Yeah, so you can consult your notes and look at the examples that are therein, so that now you get versed with the looping structures in Visual Basic.